Okay, hi, welcome to Mill Talks. This is almost the end of our season. We'll be running through April the 6th. Next week we're here with Mark Callahan to talk about his mine paper making, well, his whole art history, 50 years of artistic endeavor from Mark. He's locally known for making hand paper from plants. After that is a special archaeological presentation by Alma Duran and Stephen Merck on their work. That is a Zoom-only talk, and you need to register ahead of time, so check out the Merritt English Library website. Look for the events page for that. And then we've got more art and architecture and history coming up. Our last talk of this session is Wednesday, April the 6th. And it'll be done for the season. I met Jeff for the first time late last year in November or December. He was actually attending one of these lectures, and I made an introduction for that lecture the same as I'm doing now. And afterwards, on his way out, Jeff said to me, "Are you from Western Pennsylvania?" And guess what, I am. So I didn't know I had an accent. Apparently I do. And Jeff is from Western Pennsylvania as well, although he spent 30 years in Texas, 21 of which as the executive director of Sea Turtle Inc., and now is here in Merida, and he has dealt with some of the local sea turtle rescue and conservation efforts. So Jeff, please go ahead.
All right. Good evening. First order of business, thank you, Scott, for the invitation to be here. I'm planning about 30 minutes. I do have a gift for somebody if you get the correct answer to a question. And I listed my endangered species permits. I have to do this in the U.S. They're not valid in Mexico, but I do and have worked under U.S. Fish and Wildlife permits and Texas Parks and Wildlife permits in the state of Texas. So we begin our story once upon a time. Once upon a time, turtles roamed the earth. We know as far back as 200 million years. And we think around 140 million years ago, one of those turtles moved into the ocean. So sea turtles actually came from land turtles. One of the oldest archaeological records is this turtle, which has a 12-foot flipper span. It's called Archelon. So Archelon is the oldest known sea turtle fossil, and it's 100 million plus. And there's one direct descendant of Archelon. It's called the Leatherback sea turtle. So how did turtles survive, sea turtles, survive the impact of the meteor that hit here in the northwest corner of Yucatán 66 million years ago? Well, turtles have a very good strategy, and maybe we should all follow this. They live very long lives. They reproduce well into their 70s and 80s. They travel great distances. Not bad. And they fast. They can go long periods without eating. So all the rage now is fasting, right? At 12 hours, 14 hours. So turtles have this strategy that helped them survive the impact of the meteor, which wiped out maybe 75% of all plant and animals on Earth. Case in point, this is an eastern Atlantic leatherback sea turtle that washed up on the beaches of Texas, and she weighed 500 pounds. You can see a bit of a head injury there, but you can see the tag. The tag tells us that this turtle has been laying eggs for many, many years in Panama. Now, if you take a map and draw a line from Panama to Texas, you're going to get about 3,000 miles. So sea turtles do travel great distances. So today, we have 7 descendants of sea turtles on Earth. Unfortunately, all 7 are protected species now. So what happened? They were prolific. They survived the meteor attack. Here's their story. Sea turtles mate with multiple males. Ladies, you're very promiscuous. Maybe 5 daddies. And then the mama has to lay her eggs. So the only healthy sea turtle leaving the ocean
is the nesting female. There are two exceptions to that now in modern days. Turtles you see basking in Hawaii and in Papua New Guinea. That's a new behavior. We don't know why they're basking, maybe avoiding predation, but generally the turtle is only coming in to lay eggs. She will lay multiple nests and take multiple years off. So it averages about one nest per female per year. However, it's 2, 3, or 4 every 2, 3, or 4 years. Got it? And she will do this well into her lifespan. So here she is laying, on average, 100 eggs. Now, the larger species, maybe 70. The leatherback lays about 70 eggs. The hawksbill, about 150. Green turtles, 140. So you can use an average for percentages of about 100. After the sand has incubated the eggs, the mother, of course, is long gone. It's about 50-day incubation period. And then what happens is the babies have broken out of their shell, and the turtles on top are waiting for two things to happen. They're waiting for the temperature to cool, i.e., it's night, less predators. And they're waiting to be tickled from underneath. Hey, we're ready down here. And so the vibrations and the temperature are telling them, let's go. And they make, as you have seen on Discovery, that mad dash for the ocean. Correct? Well, not all turtles, are so fast. Let's see if we can get this. There should be a little short video here. Let's see. No, I'll skip, but they're moving very slowly. All right, but what guides them to the water is they're looking for a reflection on the ocean. If you take a moonlight walk, you see the surf crash. It's reflecting any skylight, whether that be moon or the rising sun. And remember, most often this is happening at night. So these little guys are 18, 20 grams. They're quite tiny. And they're making their mad dash to the ocean. They will spend 2 years in what's called the pelagic stage. That is, they're floating in seaweed subject to currents for 2 years. We hate the sargassum. It's all over Tulum and the Caribbean coast. But it's very important in the life cycle of a sea turtle. And so they will not deviate. They will not leave that seagrass bed. They won't dive more than a meter. They won't abandon it more than a meter for 2 years. So what moves them are ocean currents. So nesting beaches have been established over millions of years based on currents. Which beach gives my babies the best survival rate to get away from where they are? So if you look at this, you could say, well, if I'm over in Cancun or Tulum, I'm probably going to end up in Florida or the Caribbean. If I'm in Merida, if I'm in Progreso, Savastun, I'm probably going to end up in the Bay of Campeche. And so we know that's true based on satellite tags and tagging turtles. So tagging tells us a lot about turtles. And then magically, about 15 years later, here they come back to the beach where they were born to reproduce. The males come back, the females come back, and the cycle starts all over again. Well, then, remember the female is nesting 2 or 3 times, and then she takes a few years off. She's going to leave her nesting beach and go to a foraging ground. So the turtles that are nesting here don't spend year after year after year here. They'll leave and go to Florida, the Caribbean, and they'll come back. Right. Males, guys, we're lazy. Once we come back as adults, we stay put for the rest of our lives. And we whistle when the girls come back in town during nesting season. How do we know that? Satellite tags. All right? So, what was your strategy? If you're a mother, how many kids did you have? 2? 3? Okay. Well, look at the statistics. At best, 1 in 1,000 eggs reaches adulthood. This was before they were endangered species. But Mama was laying, guess how many eggs? About 5,000. She put 5 kids, more or less, in the reproductive process. Pretty good strategy. Better than you. You only had 2, right? So our strategy is we nurture. Their strategy was let's overwhelm the predators. So what happened? Well, we have evidence that turtles were harvested for meat. We know the Europeans, as they discovered the West Indies, were using them as a source of protein. And that's all well and good until World War II. Now, we're not old enough to remember World War II, but roads were developed, refrigerated trucks were developed, and this led to the exploitation of sea turtles. I sure hope I can get this to work. This video you need to see. There we go. This was taken in 1947 in Mexico, the state of Tamaulipas. And look at all those turtles laying eggs. There are thousands of them, estimated maybe 25,000 turtles, all nesting broad daylight at the same time. So their strategy was safety in numbers. But if you were a poacher from somewhere and you wanted turtle meat, if you wanted turtle eggs, they had egg poachers coming from as far away as Saudi Arabia to buy millions of eggs. There's evidence of that. And we can go to Florida and see the turtle crawls. We were harvesting turtles in Florida. This is Key West. This is a postcard from Key West, turtle crawls. Where, and of course, if you've been to Grand Cayman, there's still a turtle farm there. So they are harvested in Grand Cayman to this day. Now, here is the most graphic photograph I'm going to show you. This was taken in 1964 in Oaxaca, and you notice a Volkswagen. It's there for 2 reasons. It gives you a date reference, 64, and it gives you a size reference. Those are all turtle carcasses. Turtles were slaughtered by the thousands. Now, if you want to be in business to catch and harvest a sea turtle, which one can you catch? The nesting female. It is the only one that leaves the ocean, and it is the largest. So what we were harvesting after World War II were all the nesting females, and in one generation, we almost wiped out 7 species of animals from our oceans that had been there 80 million years. Now, enter conservation. These are 2 pioneers, Archie Carr on the left, who is long deceased, but Archie, there's a wildlife refuge in Florida named after him, began working to save sea turtles and studying them in the late 50s. On the right is Rene Marquez Malan. He was the principal founder of sea turtle conservation here in Mexico in the 1960s. So Mexico started protecting in the 60s, the U.S. In Florida in the late 50s. Now, these are photographs from the early 60s, the rancheros protecting turtles. This is nests that were moved to be protected from poachers, natural or human. And so conservation started to take hold. And for the prize, who can tell me, if you're from Canada, what year the CITES Treaty was signed to protect sea turtles in Canada? If you're from the U.S., who's the president that signed the Endangered Species Act, or what year? Yes, ma'am?
I don't know if it was Nixon?
It was Nixon. You win the prize. Believe it or not, President Nixon. 1973, Canada signed the CITES Treaty in 1974. This is a key change, but very important. the tail opens bottles of beer.
I would never do that with a turtle. Thank you.
Mine has opened thousands of bottles of beer, I can tell you. Mexico was state by state, and Mexico is a land of contrast, isn't it? And so it was. Now, in 1990, Mexico established a federal law protecting sea turtles. In 2010, they added teeth to that legislation. So they are well protected now in Mexico, but Mexico was one of the pioneers of conservation. So what's happening today? Well, lots of efforts to protect turtles, study them, help their populations recover, and we hope that someday we've done our job and we can step back and stop spending money on turtles. Hopefully they won't be endangered species. So here is one of the largest hatcheries in the world. This is in Tamaulipas, which is now controlled by the cartels. So I can no longer work there, but my counterparts in Mexico are there. They're able to do their work, and so the cartels leave them alone. There are 250,000 eggs in that corral, about 2,500 nests. Why were they moved? Because the beaches are so remote, there are so many predators, and poaching was still an issue. So hatcheries are not ideal, but they are used in some parts of the world. And so the population, generally for most species, is finally beginning to recover. This photograph is recent. On that beach in 1947, where you saw all the turtles, well, that population fell to 400, period. So this is a good sign of conservation success. And one other component that we are worried about, we put temperature data loggers in with the nest. Why? Temperature determines the sex of a reptile. Who's hot? Girls? You know you're hot. Guys, we're cool, right? We stick together. So literally in the sea turtle world, higher temperature creates females, cooler temperature males. What has it been? Well, the expert is Thane Wibbles. He's at the University of Alabama. And if you ask him, if you twist his arm, he'd say, well, historically, it's probably 70, 75% female, 25, 30% male. Where are we today? Anybody want to guess? Australia is 99% female, year after year after year after year. Can you make males? Well, these are remote beaches. What they're doing is shading the nest. They're still getting females. If they did not shade, they would overheat and die. So the threshold is very small. It's only a few degrees Celsius. Florida, 95% female. Texas, 95% female. We had 1 year of high rains a few years ago, and we got to 75% female. So we were actually celebrating that we produced more males. Is that a problem? Well, what are we seeing in our nests now? Guess what? Fewer males. Not 5, not 3, 2, 1. And we're seeing nests that never hatch. Why not? They never mated with any males. So there are concerns out there. I want to be optimistic. There are a couple of species in serious trouble, one of which is local, and we'll get to that in a minute. But generally speaking, we are starting to see recovery, and we have concerns. Did you have a question? Okay. So, here's a case in point. This was that Kemp's Ridley, that one you saw in the 1947 film, where there were thousands of turtles and you saw the eggs being harvested. Okay. If you look in the 90s, 80s, and 90s, man, we were real close to extinction here. And then finally, some of those babies made it back. And so in the 90s, any mathematicians out here? What kind of curve? Linear. Yeah? And then in the 2000s, what kind of curve? Exponential. Right? Well, Remember the females, they take a few years off. Where do the Tamaulipas chemserides go? Guess what? They go to Louisiana. From morning. They go to Louisiana. And what happened off the coast of Louisiana between April and August of 2010? Deep horizon. And look what happened to the nest numbers. Bam! And they've been going up and down ever since. Now this graph stops at about 15, but I can tell you 17 was even lower. 20, not good. It's been bouncing all over the place when we were seeing this steady exponential climb. So there are concerns out there. Just as a matter of interest, BP is paying for all the chemseridae, almost all the chemseridae conservation now, because there's data that indicates what variable changed your oil spill. So they were sued by the federal government, and that money now as a civil penalty is flowing into sea turtle conservation here in Tamaulipas, Mexico, and in the United States. So this is why we collect data. Data is really boring, but that's why, and this is a concern now. But we have others. Anybody visit Chelan or Chaberna out here near Progresso? Man, there's so much erosion going on. Turtles can't nest there. There's no beach left. Telchuk, the port of Telchuk is an important nesting beach. Fortunately, they're not seeing as much erosion there. This is a Chinese trawler. This photograph's only about 10 years old, but so China is still harvesting sea turtles for shell products. So we are optimistic, but there are concerns. Those are tumors. The turtle's upside down. This is called fibropapillomatosis. We have herpes simplex, and what happens under stress? We get a sore on our lips, fever, blister. Yeah, they get tumors. Has the virus always been present? We don't know. What causes the stress? We don't know. But it's debilitating. It will cause blindness, suffocation. It gets in their mouth, their rectal area. So it is a cause for concern. We don't see it in young turtles. We don't see it in nesting females or adult males. Only in age class. So it's baffling, the sea turtle community now. This is pretty horrific. You're looking at the right lung of that animal. If you're not familiar with turtle anatomy, the shell is literally their vertebral column and their ribs. The ribs are flat. They fuse together to make the carapace, the shell. And right underneath are the organs. So this turtle was hit by a prop, and you're thinking, wow, euthanasia is the best. But technology is amazing. This is called a cold therapy laser. And it agitates without heat the cells so that they multiply quickly. And so technology and tags and things are very helpful. You also are very helpful. We all have seen the video of the turtle with the straw up its nose. That was taken by Christine Figener, who's a friend of mine and a PhD out of Texas A&M. She's a German gal, and boy, she had to edit most of the tape because she was throwing out swear words like crazy. But little things do have a big impact. So consider that when your grandkids are visiting, not to do the balloon release, make a game out of popping them. If you notice that the bottom picture on the left, that is a turtle. The hand is pulling a produce bag out of the rear end of that turtle. And you could still read the local grocery store on the bag. So we do have a role to play regardless of how involved we are in the environment. Our difference is substantial. So, where are we in Mexico today? So these are the 6 species of Mexico. There's one species only are found in Australia. It's called the flatback. And so the Kemp's Ridley, that's one, you saw the video from 1947. It is still considered critically endangered, and of recent years, we don't know what's going on. The olive ridley, found in Costa Rica, they're still harvesting eggs, is generally not considered to be endangered. Mazunte was in some trouble, but now, thanks to conservation since 1990, their population is up over 100,000 females. So they are not really considered endangered in most parts of the world. I had a colleague that called them the rats of the sea, but not very nice. The green turtle, you will hear here referred to as Tortuga Blanca. They call it the white turtle. But if you go to the Pacific, they call it the black turtle because it's a different color. There are scientists that argue that the black turtle is an 8th species. I tend to agree because I've worked with all of them. But it is now coming up. So the beaches of the Yucatán, Quintana Roo are seeing thousands of green nests, white nests, placas now. So the population is really beginning to recover. The kawama, when you walk by the OXO and you see the kawamas 2 for $79 or something. Kawama is a loggerhead turtle, but it's also a quarter deer. And I don't get the marketing of that years ago, but so we always teased our visitors from Mexico, hey, we have kawamas here, but we don't serve them cold. They're the turtles, not the deer. And so kawamas are generally considered threatened now in many parts of the world. The Yucatan will get a few nests of loggerheads, not very many. You would see more over in Quintana Roo. Many of them nesting in Florida, the Carolina coast. So if you visited there and you heard about nesting turtles, that were the loggerheads of the kawamas. The hawksbill, which I'm going to cover a little more detail here in a minute, is still considered critically endangered in the Atlantic basin, and that of course includes the Caribbean and the Gulf. And finally, the laúd, the leatherback, in the Atlantic is considered endangered. The numbers are reasonably stable, starting to recover, but in the Pacific they are near extinction. And so remember, females go back to where they lay eggs, right? And so you have Eastern Pacific nesting females, and you have Western Pacific nesting females. Eastern Pacific is under 400 females. They are very close to extinction. And so this was the first Eastern Pacific leatherback that I ever saw in Oaxaca, and the leader of the project, who's over Oaxaca and Michoacan, took my picture, so I'm very proud to say that I've seen one, because in our lifespan, we're getting up there, but our lifespan, they may disappear. So the most critically endangered is the Eastern Pacific leatherback. Okay, so now finally to the Yucatan. Generally speaking, there are 2 nesting turtles here in the Yucatan. They are the, they are the white turtle, Tortuga Blanca, quite large, 125 to 250 kilos. They have scalloped edges on the back of the shell, the carapace, and they have 2 prefrontal scutes. You might say, well, they kind of look the same, don't they? They're beautiful. But here's how to tell them apart. First, scalloped, and the hawksbill is pointed. Okay, good. Notice the beak on the hawksbill, thus the name, the bill of a hawk. It's rounded on the white turtle, black or green turtle. And prefrontal scutes, what is that? That's the scutes between your eyes. So there are 2 long scutes on a white turtle. There are 4 on a hawksbill. So if you were on a beach someday and you were walking and you saw a dead turtle or a nesting turtle, there's the easy way right there. Look between the eyes, between these two species. And of course, the carey, the hawksbill, is much, much smaller, 80 to 125 kilos when they're nesting. So those are the two. And of course, the most critically endangered, I said the green, the white turtle is starting to recover. So most of the efforts here in Yucatan are for the hawksbill, the carey. And what does the carey give us? Grandma's tortoiseshell, hair combs, barrettes, guitar picks. Man, the guitars love them because they make great sound. So hawksbill, tortoiseshell is kind of a misnomer. It's not from a tortoise, it's from the hawksbill sea turtle. So the products are illegal to buy and sell now. You can't put it up on eBay, for example, even though it's an antique, for that reason. So the two groups responsible here in the Yucatan are a nonprofit called Pro Natura and the state government of Yucatan called SDS. So Pro Natura is also responsible for flora and fauna. In fact, they're doing a lot of research with the whale sharks in Holbox. So I'm anxious to get involved in that, kind of jump ship here. And the other is Secretaría de Desarrollo Sustentable, and that's the government agency here in Yucatan. So they're responsible for some of the smaller beaches, that being Sisal, Telchac, and Zilam, and then Pro Natura for the larger beaches. So where are we today? Moving from west to east, this is Celestun. Last year, now I'm only referring to hawksbills because that's the one we're worried about 700 nests. Then under SDS in Sisal, 99 nests. Move over to Telchac, 419. Remember we were talking about erosion. And that's a pretty significant number when you're talking about hawksbills. Move over to Zilam, 39. Okay, move over to Cuyo or Rio Lagarto, 400. And then move to the big beach, Holbox, 1,400. So Holbox is considered one of the most important nesting sites for the Caribbean hawksbill, which is critically endangered. So our beaches are very important here in Yucatan for sea turtle conservation, and in particular the hawksbill. So these are the numbers. I wonder if it's this. But what's most important here, only 10 beaches worldwide receive 1,000 hawksbill nests or more. 7 of them are in the Pacific, where the population is endangered, not critically endangered. Only 3 of them in the Atlantic. One is Holbox, one is Barbados, and one is the Virgin Islands. So it is a very important conservation program here that is handled by Pro Natura. So their websites, if you want to take a picture and peruse at your own. If you are interested, Pro Natura is a nonprofit and funded by donations. And then, of course, the state government. We also want you to support the Merida English Library because they do important work as well for other reasons. So I kind of gave you a history of sea turtles, a little bit of the life cycle of sea turtles, why they're endangered, and where we are today, particularly in Mexico. Questions? Yes, sir. Way in the back.
Can you identify the species by looking at the eggs?
The eggs? It's difficult. I could, but their size is quite different. 40 millimeters would be olive ridley or Kemp's ridley, and then as you get bigger, it's different species. A little bit bigger would be the kawama. Then a little bit bigger could be greens or hawksbills, and then the leatherbacks are huge. But yeah, it's more or less you can. And they're very soft for about 48 hours, so as she's dropping them, they're not breaking, and then they calcify. So it's very difficult to move nests after about 48 hours. And some species, like the leatherback that have the big eggs, it's really difficult to not destroy the embryo. What happens inside, the yolk gets attached by a crystalline structure. And so you start jostling it and you break the crystalline structure and you destroy the embryo. Yes, ma'am?
Yes, I think you mentioned it, but I didn't really pay attention at that time about talking about the time, the season.
Uh-huh.
When do they come
So here,
and when do they hatch?
here, thank you, I didn't mention it in the talk, but here the nesting will begin in April. Already it has started in Florida, usually in March, and then Texas, April, Tamaulipas, late March. Here in the Yucatan, April, May, June. May, June, July are the premium months where lots of turtles are nesting. And then 50 days following would be the hatching season.
Thanks.
Yes?
So can you talk about dogs?
Yes.
Yeah.
One of the big issues on some of those remote beaches, I worked every year until the last couple of years in Michoacan. Michoacan beaches are community owned, so there's no hotels, no condos, nothing. And the dogs are a major problem. And so the gentleman that took my picture with the leatherback is in charge of all the programs. And he went to the community and he actually convinced the, they don't call it a mayor, but convinced them, hey, we're going to start shooting dogs if you don't do something. So they put out the edict in the town, if your dog's roaming at night, it's going to get shot. And that lasted about 2 years. So that beach now doesn't have a dog problem. It has vultures and birds of prey. So there are a lot of things. When you get to remote beaches, they're very difficult. I worked at a beach that has the Eastern Pacific leatherback, and so they're protecting every precious egg. And their hatchery only had 3 sides. They didn't have enough fence, so they left it open. And so you'd see bird marks in there, and they were looking for eggs coming up, and their hatchlings. So, yes, sir, you had a question.
Can you use chicken incubators?
Can you?
Use chicken incubators?
Can you use an incubator? Yes. The only incubator in the world is in Corpus Christi, Texas. And it was at a cost of $4 million to the U.S. taxpayer. It's a federal program. And so they can manipulate temperature. What they were doing for many years was making females because you want more egg layers. I think now they are probably starting to make males because of the concerns of climate change. Yes, but there's only one in the world. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
So as far as when they're in the ocean, who are their predators other than humans?
So most of them get picked off in those first couple of years of life when they're quite small. We have fishing tournaments and you'll catch a large sailfish and it'll have 20, 30 babies.
Who are the adult predators?
Adult predators would be sharks,
Oh.
killer whales. Yes,
Top.
they're part of the food chain. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned the sargassum, which
Yes.
helps them a lot.
Yes.
But now that with global warming, we have more and more.
More,
What
yes.
about that?
Yeah, so what we're seeing is a lot of hatchlings washing in. They're attached, you know, they don't want to leave because that's their safety. They're eating other things, hiding in there with them. And it's their safety net. And so there's so much now. And so when you're walking the beach of Quintana Roo, they're seeing, and Texas, you're seeing lots of little guys that are washing in.
Are the boats, are the sargassum boats that are going out now in Quintana Roo and stopping it from coming in, are they doing any precautions to
I have no
come out
idea.
there?
That's a good question. I really don't know. It depends on season too, but
Yeah.
the sargassum is generally coming during hatchling
It
season.
is. It is.
for a reason, right?
And when the baby turtles wash in with the sargassum, are they dead or alive?
Both. And one of the programs that I was responsible for was we had a sea turtle hospital. If you saw that Texas had the freeze last year, my organization had 5,500 turtles in hypothermic shock in 8 days.
How many
And I-
live?
And I was retired. And they called, I retired in January, and this happened on Valentine's Day, and they called and I said, I'm having coffee in my pajamas. Good luck.
What was the
2,700,
Wow.
about half. Yeah. It was monumental. But, so that was the green turtle. The white turtle, which as I said, started to recover. So at some point you would think that would be a natural selection event. But we're not there yet. So the white turtle is the one suffering from the tumors as well. So there's good and bad. But the programs here are strictly nest conservation. There are very few sea turtle hospitals in the world, one of which that I was responsible for. But yes, ma'am.
You mentioned, for example, for white turtle, they come from here, then they go to Virgin Islands, then Barbados. Are there programs between the countries to
Yes.
harmonize things?
Yes. So Barbados is run by the University of the West Indies. Here it's Prognatura, or the state government. Tamaulipas is a binational program. Michoacan is the University of Michoacan. Oaxaca is both federal and state. So the sea turtle community, and I was never paid very much to work with sea turtles. The benefit is I got to travel and see the most beautiful beaches in the world to work with them, and the organization that I was responsible for actually funds international conservation. So I have been funding Michoacan, my organization, for 20 years, and Tamaulipas for 30 years. And so the community is very close. There's an international symposium until the pandemic hit every year in different parts of the world. And so we all share our research so we can learn from each other. And there are even programs like the kawama that nests in Japan. Those turtles spend their juvenile years in Baja California, in Mexico. And then when they're adults, guess what? They swim back to the tiny island in Japan. And so they brought, one of the international programs was, let's bring the fishermen together from Baja and Japan. They're fishermen, but they didn't realize they were catching the same population. And so I grew up in the steel industry, and so the world is not black and white. The world is gray. And so there have to be compromises. Fishermen need to fish, and turtles need to be safe because they are important in the ecosystem. There has to be a balance. There has to be conservation laws that aren't overwhelming to everyone, so, or someone. But generally speaking, I want you to be optimistic that we have problems, but things are looking good. And secondary is the Yucatán is a very important location for the hawksbill sea turtle. Anybody else? I don't know how I did on time. But
You're good. Do you have any estimate on how many turtles there were in the world before 1947? Before the massacre started?
I don't, but I would say that probably the best guess would be there were probably over 100,000 nesting females of each of the 7 species. And so it's certainly a self-sustainable number. And we have an olive ridley and a Kemp's ridley, for example. The Kemp's ridley is only found in the Gulf of Mexico. The olive ridley is a Pacific turtle, but they're very close genetically. What happened? Well, they were around before the Isthmus of Panama shot up out of the ocean. And when it shot up, some of the ridleys got stuck in the Atlantic and some got stuck in the Pacific. And so they evolved into Pacific Ridleys almost, and Atlantic Ridleys, Caps Ridleys. So genetically, they were 40 million years ago. They were the same species. It wasn't that long, 10 million years ago. So, but certainly self-sustainable until man stepped in. And hopefully we'll get back to that point here soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.